was 17 the first time my parents told me not to come home. The sentence itself was simple, almost casual, spoken over a crackling phone line on a rainy evening when the sky outside my hostel window looked as heavy as my chest felt. But the meaning behind it was anything but simple. "Don't come home, Amelia," my mother said, her voice low and strained. "Your sister doesn't want you there." I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Parents didn't say things like that, not to their own children, not so easily. "What do you mean she doesn't want me there?" I asked. "I'm coming home for the break. I already told—" My father's voice interrupted mine, firm and final. "It's better this way. Your sister needs peace right now. Don't make things difficult." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no comfort. The call ended, and with it, something inside me quietly broke. My name is Amelia, and I was the daughter who was always expected to understand, to adjust, to sacrifice. I was the one who learned early that love in our house came with conditions, and those conditions could change overnight. My younger sister, Bianca, had always been the center of my parents' world. She was fragile, emotional, brilliant in ways that demanded attention. I was strong, independent, and dependable, the kind of child parents leaned on without realizing the weight they were placing. So when Bianca said she didn't want me home, my parents didn't question it. They complied. That night, I lay awake listening to the rain hit the glass, wondering how I had become the unwanted one in my own family. Part 2, learning to live without a home. I didn't go home that summer, or the next one. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that once Bianca felt better, once things settled down, my parents would call and tell me to come back. I kept my suitcase under my bed, half-packed, like a silent promise to myself that I still belonged somewhere. But weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. My parents' calls became infrequent and brief. They asked about my grades, my health, my plans, but never about my heart. Bianca's name, however, came up in every conversation. "She's doing so well," my mother would say. "She's under a lot of pressure," my father would add. "You know how sensitive she is." And I did know. I had always known. I just hadn't realized that her sensitivity would one day cost me my place in the family. I worked 2 jobs through college, one at a cafe in the mornings, another at the library at night. I learned how to stretch a single meal into 2, how to smile through exhaustion, how to cry silently so my roommates wouldn't hear. There were days I felt invisible. Days when I watched other students go home for holidays, arms full of gifts and stories, while I stayed behind, pretending I preferred the quiet. But there was also something else growing inside me during those years: resilience. I learned who I was without my family's approval. I learned how strong I could be when no one was there to catch me if I fell. And slowly, painfully, I built a life that didn't revolve around being chosen. That was when I met Daniel. Part 3, the man who chose me. Daniel entered my life quietly, like a calm presence I hadn't known I was missing. He was sitting across from me in the library one night, surrounded by books on architecture, when he noticed me rubbing my temples in frustration. "Long day?" he asked, offering a gentle smile. I nodded, not trusting my voice. That simple question turned into a conversation. The conversation turned into coffee. Coffee turned into late-night walks, shared dreams, and a friendship that felt safe in ways I wasn't used to. Daniel didn't need me to be the strong one all the time. He noticed when I was tired, when I was hurting, when I was pretending I was fine. One night, as we sat on the steps outside my apartment, he asked about my family. I hesitated, then told him the truth. The phone call, the years of distance, the sister who didn't want me home. He didn't interrupt. He didn't minimize my pain. When I finished, he said only one thing: "You didn't deserve that." No one had ever said that to me before. Daniel became my partner in every sense of the word. When I doubted myself, he reminded me of my worth. When I succeeded, he celebrated me like my victories were his own. With him, love didn't feel like something I had to earn. Years later, when he proposed to me under a sky full of stars, I said yes without fear, because for the first time I knew I was chosen. Part 4, the invitation. Planning the wedding brought back emotions I thought I had buried. There were moments of joy, choosing colors, tasting cakes, laughing with friends, but there was also one question that hovered over everything. Do I invite my family? Daniel told me it was my choice. He meant it. But something inside me still longed for closure, for acknowledgement, for a moment where I could stand in front of them as someone who had survived. So I sent the invitations. My parents responded quickly, surprisingly so. "We'll be there," my mother said over the phone. "Your sister too." Her tone was neutral, almost formal. No apology, no reference to the past. I told myself I didn't need one. Part 5. The wedding day. On the day of my wedding, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my dress, my heart racing. Not with fear, but with anticipation. I looked at my reflection and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked confident, grounded, whole. When I walked down the aisle and saw Daniel waiting for me, his eyes shining with pride and love, I knew everything I had endured had led me here. The ceremony was beautiful. Vows were exchanged. Tears were shed. Applause filled the room. Then came the reception. As I moved from table to table, greeting guests, I finally reached my parents. They stood stiffly, my father's hands clasped behind his back, my mother's smile polite but distant. Bianca stood beside them, elegant and composed, her eyes assessing me like a stranger. "You look nice," Bianca said. "Thank you," I replied, calm. There was an awkward pause before my father cleared his throat. "We didn't expect this," he said. "Your life, your success." I smiled softly. I didn't either. Then my mother said something that changed everything. "We always thought you'd come back. That eventually you'd understand." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt no anger. "I did understand," I said. "I understood that I had to build a life where I was wanted." Silence fell between us. Later that evening, during the speeches, Daniel surprised me by handing me the microphone. "There's something Amelia would like to say," he announced gently. I took a deep breath. "I was once told not to come home," I said, my voice steady, "because someone else didn't want me there." That moment broke me, but it also built me. It taught me that family isn't defined by blood, but by choice. Today I stand here surrounded by people who chose me and whom I choose in return. I looked at Daniel, then at my parents. This is my home now. Epilogue. Coming home to myself. My parents left early that night. Bianca avoided my gaze. But I didn't feel the loss I once would have. Because I had already grieved the family I thought I had, and in doing so, I had found something far greater, myself. I didn't need their permission anymore. I had come home at last. After the phone call that changed everything, I didn't just lose a home, I lost a history. Birthdays passed without messages. Holidays arrived like strangers I didn't know how to greet. At first, I still sent cards. I still called on anniversaries. I still tried, but effort without response slowly teaches you a cruel lesson. Silence is an answer. What hurt the most wasn't being told not to come home. It was realizing how easily they accepted my absence. I replayed that phone call in my mind countless times. My mother's voice, my father's certainty, Bianca's unspoken power. I wondered how many conversations had happened before that call. How many times my name had been spoken like a problem to be solved rather than a daughter to be protected. Because survival demands forward motion. Part 7. Bianca's Shadow. Growing up, Bianca and I were never equals. She was delicate, emotional, prone to anxiety attacks, and tears that frightened my parents into immediate action. I was calm, logical, steady. When something broke, I fixed it. When someone cried, I comforted them. Somewhere along the way, my strength became an excuse. "She'll understand," my parents would say when plans changed. "She's mature," when I was overlooked. "She doesn't need as much," when Bianca needed more. Bianca learned early that vulnerability was a currency. By the time we were teenagers, her resentment toward me had hardened into something sharper. Teachers compared us. Relatives praised my independence. Friends admired my confidence. Bianca didn't see my sacrifices, only the attention I received without asking. When she told my parents she didn't want me home, it wasn't impulsive, it was calculated, born from years of silent competition. And my parents chose the child who needed them more, never realizing that they were teaching the other one she didn't need them at all. Part 8. Building a life brick by brick. Independence isn't glamorous when it's forced. I learned to manage loneliness like a chronic ache, something that never fully goes away but becomes familiar. I celebrated my achievements quietly. I mourned alone. I became my own safety net. Daniel once asked me how I learned to be so self-sufficient. I told him the truth. When no one comes to save you, you learn to save yourself. That sentence stayed with him. We built our life slowly. No grand gestures, no dramatic promises, just consistency, trust, presence. Daniel's love didn't feel overwhelming. It felt grounding. He never asked me to shrink or stretch. He never compared me to anyone else. With him, I wasn't the responsible one or the forgotten one. I was just Amelia. Part 9, The Parents' Silence. When my parents received my wedding invitation, it forced something they had avoided for years: confrontation. My mother cried that night, not because she missed me, but because the illusion of control had shattered. I had built a life without their permission, without their guidance, without their approval. My father reacted differently. He grew quiet, reflective. For the first time, he wondered whether doing what was easier had been the same as doing what was right. Bianca, however, felt threatened. My wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was proof. Proof that I hadn't failed. Proof that I hadn't needed them. Proof that removing me hadn't erased me. And that terrified her. At the wedding, Bianca watched me carefully. The dress, the confidence, the way people gravitated toward me, the way Daniel looked at me like I was the only person in the room. She hadn't expected that. In her mind, I was supposed to be smaller, struggling, regretful. Later that night, after most guests had left, she found me alone on the balcony. "I didn't think you'd turn out like this," she said. I didn't ask what she meant. "I thought you'd come back," she continued. "That you'd need us." I met her gaze calmly. "You didn't want me there." Her eyes flickered. "I was scared," she admitted, "of always being second. That was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. And I paid the price for that fear," I said quietly. She said nothing. Part 11. The Reckoning. A week after the wedding, my parents asked to meet me. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, neutral ground. No childhood memories, no emotional leverage. My mother reached for my hand and stopped halfway. "We thought we were protecting the family," she said. "You were," I replied. "Just not me." My father nodded slowly. His voice cracked. "We failed you." Those words came too late, but they mattered. I didn't forgive them that day. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a process. But I released something heavier: the need for their validation. Part 12. What home really means. Home isn't a place that rejects you when you become inconvenient. Home isn't conditional. Home doesn't ask you to disappear so someone else can feel comfortable. Home is where you are seen. Daniel and I built ours intentionally, with honesty, with respect, with space for growth. I didn't go back to the house I grew up in. I didn't reclaim my old room. I didn't try to rewrite the past because I didn't need to. I had already come home to myself. Final reflection. Once my parents told me, "Don't come home. Your sister doesn't want you there." Years later at my wedding, I realized something profound. They were right. That place was never my home. This life is.